So here we are in the assignment section, and here we have the assignment criteria. If you in the drop down here, there are three main elements of the criteria that will be assessed: the depth and relevance of the components in the presentation, the correct use of relevant conventions of spoken English, the citation of others' ideas and works, and the correct use of APA referencing. So usually the best thing to do when you're looking at a criteria is highlight some key features and some keywords. So we'll just go through this here and do that. For the first part, the depth and relevance of the components in the presentation, the components mean all the unit concepts, the vocabulary, when you're talking about your classroom examples, when you're talking about your descriptions and your definitions. This is the bit where you're really showing your understanding of the unit content. So for a pass, you just want to make sure that you have a definition and description of the teaching and learning of English and literacy. Now for a credit, that moves towards having clearly defined and described English and literacy strands. If in addition to that, it's also going to include the Early Years Learning Framework and the Australian curriculum. When you're moving through to a distinction, the keywords here are added depth. You've got added depth of thinking displayed and a wide range of dimensions. This usually comes in with a wider range of research being included, and the depth comes in from more analysis and critical thinking. When you move forward towards the high distinction, it's a very highly sophisticated and thought-provoking piece that shows a lot of insight. Again, here we've got the critical thought, it's the analysis that we're looking for, and a real ability to show that you can apply the unit concepts within a classroom context. Still on the components, we have an example was provided for a pass. So again, to pass you actually need to have these parts in it. But as you move along, for a credit you want these to be very relevant examples. So again, there's a little bit of added depth here with the demonstrating the understanding of similarities and differences between those two concepts. And here again, it's the wide range of dimensions of the educational context, and that again comes from really reading up a lot about how these concepts are applied in the classroom. Again, when you're moving towards a higher distinction, usually those are with integrated sources and added depth in that area. We're going to look here, we have an attempt to make a comparison. So again, it's essential for you to pass that you have those three things, that you're defining and describing English and literacy, that you're providing an example, and that you are attempting to compare between English language and literacy. But as you move forward here, it's a clear comparison, and the keywords here, again, it's that you'll see the depth and the critical analysis coming through for those higher marks. The second main element of the criteria, which is worth 20%, is your presentation and communication. So it's important that this is still a text, even though it's a spoken text, it's not a written text. It needs to be structured appropriately, meaning that it's going to have an introduction, body and conclusion. Again, as you're moving along, it becomes a more engaging format. This one is really thinking about your audience here as you're moving in towards the distinction to attract the listener's attention. It might include it has a coherent and logical take-home message that is sort of thought-provoking and encouraging reflection for the listener. But for this one, for the highest distinction, high distinction, you're going to have a highly engaging, sophisticated and thought-provoking presentation there. Here, when we're talking about conventions and features of spoken English, we're looking at word choice, pace, inflection, basically sentence structure, and using the correct grammar, as you move on, you'll see it's more higher end vocabulary that really demonstrates confidence and that you're able to articulate yourself really clearly, enunciate well, and result in a more polished presentation for that high distinction. So remember, thinking here how fast you are speaking, making sure that the listener can keep up with you, it's structured well, and that your message is coming across clearly and effectively. Finally, we have the research and referencing component of the criteria, which is worth 20%. So for a pass, you're going to need to make sure that you're supporting your discussion points with reference to the Early Years Learning Framework, or your relevant syllabus for your state, the Australian curriculum, and some other relevant sources that you'll find either from the learning materials or scholarly literature. Again, as you move up across these, we're looking at here a wide range of scholarly and professional sources. So this is demonstrates a high engagement with those curriculum documents and a wide range of academic literature. This part here is about the fact that you have cited all all ideas that are not your own, and that you are using accurate APA referencing, which you can find help with in the Student Hub. You might have some minor errors here, but when we're looking at the distinction and the high distinction, we're really looking for accurate APA referencing at that standard. So an important note at the end is if the assignment fails to reach a satisfactory standard on each criterion, or it does not fulfill the task requirements, then it must be awarded a no pass. We don't do this lightly because we really want you to pass. We share your goal of course completion and succeeding in your learning. However, we have to mark against an academic standard, and these no passes are always cross-marked between the ELA team. So, like I said, it's not something that we take lightly, and if you feel like you're having any trouble with any of the criteria when you're creating your presentation and you look back over it and think that you're not really sure, then make sure that you come into the discussion boards and ask us as many questions as you want, because that's what we're here for. We want to help you succeed and pass and meet that standard for your assignment.